good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed friends and cherished rivals. Pray, allow us to extend the warmest of welcomes to our most distinguished gathering. I am Jared, with the worst English accent of all time, your humble host. And by my side is the ever-graceful and most refined Anna.
Hello.
Hello, Poppet.
Cheerio.
We just lost all the UK.
No.
It is our singular pleasure and privilege to preside over this episode's engagement. With hearts full of gratitude, we thank you for gracing our table with your presence. Here at the Game Table Podcast, we devote ourselves to the noble pursuit of examining the finest diversions at the tabletop. Be they games of cards, boards, or cunning stratagems. Our purpose is simple, yet most worthy. To offer a thorough discourse on each game's merits, to illuminate its intricacies, and to provide insight that may guide you in discerning whether it might hold a place of honor among your own gaming table.
On this most auspicious occasion, we turn our attention to Obsession, a most captivating entertainment crafted with elegance by Mr. Dan Halligan and brought forth by the esteemed purveyors of fine games, Kayenta Games. Set amidst the grandeur and rigid decorum of the Victorian era, Obsession is a game of social ascension, estate refinement, and strategic courtship. As stewards of noble houses, players shall endeavor to restore their family's former glory, cultivating their estates, hosting resplendent gatherings, and forging advantageous connections. Yet beware, for the path to prominence is fraught with peril. Should scandal taint your name, or financial missteps undo your careful planning, your house may very well fall into irretrievable disgrace. Shall you rise to the pinnacle of society, securing your legacy among the most distinguished families of the age? Or will the weight of misfortune see your ambitions crumble like a neglected estate? Let us delve with both admiration and scrutiny into the allure and intricacies of Obsession. Was that an English accent?
I don't know. How bad was mine?
I don't even know what mine was.
You had this, Disney old lady storybook voice that came over you.
Very good. Excellent.
Well, sorry, everyone. Back to American English accents at this time.
We apologize for our
Temporary loss of control.
uncouth expression.
Anna.
Yes.
What is the fanciest party you've ever been to?
Ooh. Well, it might be the fanciest party that you have also been to.
100%. But I figured
So
you
we
would be
should
more
talk about
interested in
different
talking about it.
things. Well, once upon a time, Jared, last summer, in fact,
Whoa.
I was invited to a ball.
You were.
I was.
I was too.
You invited me to the ball. And
As my +1.
yes. And I was so excited. I felt like a fairy tale princess. I got to get all dressed up and fix my hair in a fun, fancy updo, which really only happens when I'm like a bridesmaid in weddings or something like that. It's like
Yeah, that makes sense.
this very rare occasion. It basically felt like I was getting ready for prom all over again, except without being socially awkward and terrified of what people might think of me.
We also had a big F-150 pickup truck instead of a limo. There was that too.
I mean, we were going to the ball in Lebanon, so
Yeah, it fit.
was a little bit more appropriate to, I think everybody loved our F-150. Anyway, and there were photographers taking pictures, and there were fancy, hors d'oeuvres and
Dancing. And lots of people spending money on auction stuff.
It was really fun. It felt very fancy, and definitely the fanciest thing I've ever been to.
Wow.
And I know that is also the most fancy thing you've ever been to.
Yeah, so I don't do fancy. It's so far removed from my personality and lifestyle, and it makes me nervous because of how pristine and proper and perfect everything has to feel, to the point that everything feels fake.
So you felt like I did feel at my high school prom when we went to this fancy thing this last summer.
I didn't go to prom, but I imagine that's what it feels like.
So this is like way better than prom because I wasn't as self-conscious as I was back in high school. I could just really enjoy myself.
I was so happy for you. Inviting you was the best part of that ball, for sure.
Oh, that's nice.
The thing that came to mind for me, it was not a fancy party, but every time we play through this game, I can't help but think about were we dating, or I feel like we were dating when you did this. You took me through the 6-hour version of Pride and Prejudice.
I did.
And
it was wonderful.
I had no idea what I was getting into, but I feel like I was the best sport about it.
It's really something that I think we just really timed it perfectly, because I don't know that you would watch it with me now.
See, that's interesting.
You think you would?
I think it would be a harder sell only because we have kids. If like at our current age, if you're like, hey, I want to show you this thing that's really important to me, but it's 6 hours, I'm like, all right.
So this was like an annual thing that my friends and I did during college.
It's true. And you also did not have kids at the time.
Yes, the whole friend group, guys, girls, everybody, we would hang out at our friend's house and just watch the 6-hour Pride and Prejudice movie marathon all by itself. There.
So I participated as a young male who was very much never into anything Jane Austen related, but loved sports and games and not anything at all related to this film. But I knew it was important to you, and I was like, it's only 6 hours of my life, and it'll be fine. And
you enjoyed it.
I did enjoy it. I got really into the characters. I could tell. I had a running list of who the best male suitors were as we went through the movie. I think I entertained everyone at the group because they had all seen it, and so I added a new element for that year.
Yes, I remember your reaction to Mr. Collins when he proposed, and you were so angry.
That's true. I was not happy about that. Collins was I can't say that word. But.
Yeah, you can't say that word. No, my favorite part was that I think you basically enjoyed it by turning it into a football game in your mind. So you had your list of your top players and who you were rooting for, and you had your boy Bingley.
Oh, I love Bingley.
And you called him your boy Bingley.
A
boy. Oh, fun times.
You guys, I was rooting for my boy. Like, he deserved everything.
You know, Bingley's not even supposed to be the one you're rooting for.
I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. That's cool.
All right. Well, let's jump into this. We're going to talk about how to play in an overview format, and then we will give some of our thoughts. In Obsession, you play as a noble family attempting to restore your state to its former glory while improving your social standing at the same time. Over the course of 16 or 20 rounds, depending on how long of a game you want to play, you will host events, upgrade your estate, earn wealth, and attract influential guests. All with the ultimate goal of earning the most victory points through estate upgrades, valuable guests, and successful courtships. Each player selects a family and receives their own player board, a starting hand of guests, a set of servants including butlers, footmen, and maids, a starting amount of money, starting tiles representing the rooms and grounds of your estate, and each player also receives objective cards that hold secret goals that can boost your final score. The central game board is set up with the market of improvement tiles, guest decks, as well as the victory point deck and the round tracker. The game is played over a series of rounds where players take turns performing actions. Each turn consists of hosting an event, where you get to select a room tile from your estate and you activate it. Each room has different effects, such as earning money, improving reputation, or granting new guest options. Hosting an event requires guests, and certain guests demand specific type of servants to attend with them. So once you've established your event and you've invited your guests, you're going to have to assign your servants. You're going to deploy the necessary staff to make sure the event is a ravishing success. Butlers, footmen, valets, and housekeepers are in high demand, and managing them wisely is very crucial. You might have the perfect guest, but if you don't have the right servant available, they'll have to wait for another occasion. After hosting, you receive the benefits of your event. Guests may provide money, reputation, or even introduce you to new acquaintances. Once an event concludes, the used guests are set aside to refresh, and servants take time off before they can be assigned again.
A major highlight of Obsession is the courtship phase that comes at the end of each season. During the courtship phase, families compete to win the favor of the prestigious family, the Fairchilds. There are 2 Fairchild children who you can invite to be a part of your next event if you win their favor. The player with the most influence in the preferred category for that round gains a powerful Fairchild guest and a valuable reward. This adds a layer of friendly rivalry as players race to impress. Improving your estate is essential also for long-term success. Throughout the game, you can purchase new room tiles from the market and expand your manor with ballrooms and gardens and libraries and more. Upgrades not only provide bonuses, but they also increase your reputation and allow you to attract different, more, and better guests, therefore earning greater rewards. Now, not all guests are created equal. Some bring great prestige and wealth, while others, well, you may draw them and realize they're only going to decrease your reputation as long as they're in your hand. So managing your guest list is key, and ensure that those scandalous or unruly guests don't tarnish your standing while making the most of influential acquaintances. Your reputation is another important component of the game, because if you have a higher reputation, it unlocks access to better guests and better room upgrades, but neglecting it can limit your options. At the end of 4 seasons, which is either 16 or 20 rounds, you have the end game and scoring. After the final round, players tally their scores based on the value of their estate improvements, their reputation level, victory points they gain from the guests in their hands, courtship bonuses, the secret objective card bonuses, and then the player with the highest total wins, having established the most distinguished estate in Derbyshire and definitely having married off all of their children to very eligible suitors.
All right. So Dan Halligan is the one who designed, did the artwork for, and published this game. He is a true one-man team, and this is his game. And I just want to hats off to you, my man, because I know that is a lot of work, and I could not imagine doing all of those different things for a company. Congrats to you and your success, and thank you so much for creating this game, because we have had a ton of fun with it.
Definitely.
So just wanted to say that off the top. Anna, do you have any thoughts about the artwork and how it lends itself to this game?
100%. Yeah, I'd say that's one of the main things that stuck out when we first opened the game. Is it's beautiful. Each card of the guests has a portrait on it, has the person's name and beautiful lettering. It has a little bit of a bio about them. There's art on the boards that you're keeping track of, your round trackers, and the upgrades that you can buy for your house. And even the backs of the cards, again, you've got this kind of old Victorian England portrait feel to them. So that was something that was really cool. I just kept looking through my cards the first time. I remember just enjoying the pictures because they look like old timey portraits.
Yeah, they do. I think everything from an artwork perspective and just a design of the layout of both the tiles and the cards and the boards for that matter, everything's very elegant.
Yes.
Very simple, very straightforward, but it has this like fanciness to it that lets you get into the theme. And this kind of moves artwork and gameplay together into the theme, which is the primary focus of this game.
Yeah. But
there is also a really good game here too. But I will say, I like you, not just looking at the cards, I'm like putting together a whole backstory in my head of what's going on with these characters and how they intertwine together and who's fancying who and who's upset with who and who invited this guy and that sort of thing. So I thought it was just a really cool way to kind of let that narrative, both through game mechanics and just in my own mind, kind of put that story together.
I agree. And we'll even talk about that as we play the game. We'll say, oh, my youngest son, so-and-so, has now asked this lady to come and accompany him in a walk in the garden, and so on and so forth. And I remember one game where I had the opportunity, I think a couple of times in a row, to get one of the Fairchilds to come to one of my events. And of course, I always chose Charles, the guy, and I always had him go with the most eligible lady from my family, because your starting hand, they don't really give you as many victory points, but they have different abilities and they are all your starting family.
Sure.
So that's what you have to start with as a family. And then 2 kind of like guests that are just hanging out with you.
Yeah, like they've got a little bit of prominence, but really they're low level.
Yes. And so part of my story was, okay, man, if I got the most eligible suitor, he's going to go with the young lady from my family, because that's what you want to do. You want to elevate your family into the social graces of the high class and get her to marry off the best she can, etc. So yes, I think the artwork lends itself very well. The small little bios that you have on the cards lend itself well for you being able to really immerse yourself and contribute to the story as you play, which is one of my favorite parts about the game. And I agree with you. I think that the theme is probably why you would end up wanting to play this game.
Yeah, 100%.
I think if you are somebody like Jared described who had never watched the 6-hour Pride and Prejudice and preferred football games, then I don't know that you'd be able to get as into it. But if you're somebody that has seen even, the 2-hour Pride and Prejudice, or read a Jane Austen novel, or has watched or done research.
Yep, Bridgerton's the new hotness that is on Netflix. So
on
like
Bridgerton or any of the other shows, as I was about to say, kind of set in Victorian England, I think you're going to really be able to get into the theme because it feels like you're playing that. And you're not playing it as the high class. You're almost playing it as like this family that like has the potential to fall off. Like, we dug ourselves a little bit in the hole. Are we going to fall out of the history books and out of fine society, or are we going to make it back? So I think that's kind of a cool
I do like
way
the almost redemption story. It's like your family used to be in this prominence and you kind of fell off as the new guard came through.
Yeah.
And
your
now,
house is still big and you have servants, but it's kind of bare bones.
Yep. It needs an upgrade.
Yeah.
No, I'm with that for sure. I think the theme is so important because the game's not perfect. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I really enjoy it. I really get into the game. But if you're coming just for the game mechanics, I think you can find everything in this game elsewhere. And I think that you could find a theme that you're more into. But if you have interest in this theme, or maybe you have a friend or a significant other who has interest in this theme, then I think it's worth checking out because I think it does a great job of landing the theme that it's trying to do.
Now, in addition to the theme, though, you do have this building mechanic. So you're building your estate, essentially, every single round. If you have money that's coming from somewhere, you can buy and add rooms onto your estate. And I think that that's a cool way to personalize it as well, because you can think, oh, I want to cater my estate toward having times with the boys. And you can get a lot of rooms that are catered to men coming and having parties, because each of the rooms they're named a certain thing. Like there's the garden conservatory and the drawing room and the ladies' parlor and things like that.
Sure.
And then they have on them the kinds of visitors that can come. And some rooms are only intended for male-oriented activities. And some, like obviously the ladies' parlor, is only intended for female-oriented activities, and some are for both. And so that's kind of a cool aspect to the game too, is you really have this ability to personalize your house, and there's this building your own kingdom aspect to it. And another thing I'll say about that is that you can't just build. You have to use the rooms because the rooms have this mechanic where when you use them, they flip over to a side that typically gives you more victory points. Sometimes you have slightly lower bonuses of like getting money or rewards for those rooms, but they typically always will give you more victory points if you use the room and then flip the room over to its other side. So you can't just build out a huge estate and have it turn into a ghost mansion. That's not going to give you reputation and prestige in the community.
You need people.
You got to build out the estate and then host all your parties. So you got to have that balance there.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually think one of my favorite things about this game is that having a stack of guests can actually get you a significant amount of points.
Yeah.
Because recruiting those guests, like you're just continually adding points until you don't, because you get that very obnoxious guest that ends up causing you negative points, and you have to find a way to, how do we get rid of this guy in a very respectable fashion?
Yes.
Because you can't just kick somebody out on a whim. Like you got to do it in a certain way.
Yes. There is no just discarding guests out of your hand. Kicking people out would be considered inhospitable, and
that's not what we're after.
You would not be doing that. Yeah.
That's right. That's one of my favorite mechanics. I love just collecting guests, and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited we're going to get to meet all these new people. And then, why are you here? So, and it has that feel of you hear the doorbell and your butler goes over to answer the door, and then you're just like, oh my. And you feel that oh my every time.
Yeah.
You only have so many guests that you get to work with at a time, because every time you use a guest, they're essentially occupied until you burn a turn to pass, not do anything, just so you can get your people back again. So I like that. I like the way that the game gives you lots of opportunities for new guests, but you don't know who you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. I like that a lot.
And amassing a lot of guests also gives you points. And as your reputation goes up, there are actually 2 guest decks that you can draw from.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get to a certain level with your reputation, you can start attracting the guests that are the level 2 prestige guests, which just make you feel like, man, I am so making it in this Victorian era society now that I can invite these very high prestige people to my parties.
But it's a balance, because your reputation has to be high enough to be able to play them.
Yes.
For them to actually show up instead of just receiving the invitation, which is also a good balance too, because if I'm just some level 1 rep, why would Taylor Swift show up in my house? You know what I'm saying?
That is not a very English example, but I see what you're saying.
I mean, I work with what I know.
Yes, there were games where I got so excited about a level 2 prestige guest, but she needed maybe a level 5 reputation to even come to my party. And so I had to work for the whole game just to get her to come to one party. Whereas
but the payout's totally worth it.
The payout was really, really worth it. But I did work almost the whole game just to get her to come to my party once. Versus there are some level 2 prestige guests that only need a reputation of 3 or of 4, and you can invite them to your party over and over again. But if they're just sitting in your hand, then they're kind of cluttering up your hand. And yeah, so I think there's a balance there.
I think something else that I like, and I don't use it often enough, but it's so interesting to have this. So in addition to your normal action that you do on your turn, there's these special actions that you can do to either borrow money or, get your servants back in the game faster, or refreshing the builder's market, because sometimes the builder's market gets really stale and you just want new stuff. And you can do that, but it's at the cost of reputation. And for you and I, we play a certain way where we want to do it right and do it perfect and do it really clean.
Yeah. And we don't want to cost reputation to do things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't like doing those shady things, but there's sometimes you really need to do it. And so there's this nice balance of learning, because at first you get really fearful of these actions because your reputation is so valuable in so many parts of the game that you're like, I can't afford that. But then as you learn to play the game, there's this extra depth layer of, oh, this is a good time to do that because I'm going to be able to recoup it really quickly, and it's going to get me ahead in this other track, and it adds another layer, and I really like that too.
Yeah, and that goes back a little bit to the objective cards that you draw at the start of the game. So the objective cards have a lot of different ways that you can earn extra victory points at the end, but 2 major categories in those objective cards are collecting certain types of rooms and buildings in your estate and collecting certain groups of servants in your estate.
Sure.
And so those are two main ways to earn extra victory points if you draw those objective cards. But if you think about it, somebody has to be buying or refreshing pretty continuously with the builder's market in order for you to see enough tiles to get the 3 that your card is wanting you to look for.
Yep.
There is some repeat among some of the tiles, but there are some that are only in there once.
I would say it's one of my critiques. So the objective deck as a whole, it's fine. I mean, I'm glad to have that, but it's a very standard objective deck where these things happen during the game. If you do them, then you're going to get extra points for it, and then you just kind of pick which ones you want to go for. But I don't like the whole find this specific tile or find these specific tiles to get points. And then not only do you have to find them on the builder's market, you then have to add them to your estate before they would actually count. I mean, I get it. Like, if you get it, it's a lot of points. And so you're kind of rolling the dice that you're going to find it. But it's also a hefty bag of tiles. And like you said, even at higher player counts where you're cycling through a lot of different tiles, 1, there's no guarantee you're going to see it. 2, there's no guarantee you're going to see it on your turn. Because it might pop out, but then someone before you buys it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of those. I mean, to be fair to the game, it gives you 5 choices, and you pick 2. So you're probably going to dodge that. But I have had hands where I drew all 5 that said, find these tiles.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, well, here we go.
And it's cool when it plays out, but it does become maybe your sole focus. Is you've got 2 of them and you just need a 3rd one and you don't know where it is in the bag and you're costing 12, 13, 15 points if you don't get that last tile.
Yeah, because you don't know what the opponent has. And so they could have easy, just get some servants and they're done.
Yeah.
And that's not, I say that's actually also really tight. Everything in this game is super tight about having just enough, but also not quite.
Because you start with some servants that are your own, and then there's servants that you can hire.
Right.
But say if Jared hires all of the footmen, and then later on I want to go hire some footmen, I can hire Jared's, and I can take his footmen from him. You
can, but you've got to do some work to be able to get that action, because it's not a basic. You've got to upgrade some things before you actually can do that. So you're really committing to it. It's a
basic upgrade, though.
It is a basic upgrade. I agree. But you also only have so many turns in a game. So if you're committing a whole turn to do that, you're committing a second turn to steal somebody. And then it becomes very angsty.
What I'm saying is that I actually like the objectives that have you collecting certain types of buildings, because I know once I get my buildings, I'm set.
That's true.
I don't know if I'm going to get to keep my servants.
That's a fair point.
I mean, we played a game where you had a lot of objective cards that had to do with servants. I had one where
that devastated me.
Where I drew one objective card that just said I had to have this one kind of servant.
And there's only one.
And there's only one of them in the entire
game. Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is easy. Literally all I have to do is the last turn of the game, I just use the tile that lets me take that one guy from Jared, and then I get this victory card. But what that did was that messed up like 2 or 3 of your objective win conditions. Is that right?
Yeah, there was one in particular where I had to have 10 servants, and you took my 10th.
Okay.
It was rough. It was really bad.
So anyway, that's why I prefer the ones where you have to collect certain tiles, because they can't be messed up. But anyway.
So it's a pro and a con, and we'll kind of use this as wrapping up our things that we like to move into things that maybe we don't like as much of.
Well, and I've got one more thing that I like.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to say, because we haven't talked about it yet, I like the servant management.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I think that that's an important aspect of the game, because I can have the servants, but once I use them once, they take 2 turns to come back to me, because they rest and then they kind of go to their quarters and then they come back and they're ready to serve. And most of the guests that you're going to invite to your party require at least one attendant or servant. And so you can be delaying a party that you want to have for several turns if you don't manage your servants correctly and you accidentally send the servant that needs to attend one of your guests out on some other mission. So I think that I like that part of it, though. It frustrated me a lot. I remember the first time I played the game being like, I never have the right people.
And I was going to say, they're very valuable once you get a lot of guests because every high-end guest wants a freaking servant with it.
Everybody does, yeah. And so that was frustrating, and I felt like, oh, I can't do what I want to do. I can't. But then, now that we've played the game, more than just that first time, we've played it many times now. I appreciate the servant management aspect of the game and needing to think ahead and plan ahead for the party that you're going to have to make sure you've got the right servants. I mean, that's thematically also accurate that you would have to do that. So,
absolutely. No, that's a good call out. And yeah, we'll get to some of the other things. So now we'll transition into things we might not like as much, but that kind of touches on it too. A good and bad and all the time frustrating thing is how tight this game is.
So tight.
It's very tight on turns, on resources, on stuff, on your people, everything. So if you really like that, where you're always like, I don't know if I have enough, we're going to try and make it work, and this is what I got to work within, I think you're going to really like this because it does that in spades across the board.
Which also, again, it's stressful, and you always feel like you don't have enough money, and you always feel like you don't have enough servants, and you always feel like, oh, darn, why did Dad go off to the billiard room? I need him to go and do this other thing now,
That's right? Yep.
But also, it's got this attitude of it is like you never feel like you've made it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the goal of the game is you want to get your family to where they have made it, and you haven't yet.
Sure.
So it's got this tight, always having to be careful about your resources and your management as a part of the theme, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'll say that because you and I both said that before we got on here. I think we both thoroughly enjoy this game while we're playing. And I'll speak for me. I generally walk away being like, I want one more like season.
Yeah.
Or like a set of turns. I don't feel like I've completed what I'm building here.
Yeah, I agree.
And yes, that should be good because it shows how tight the game is, and that makes it much more competitive from that standpoint. But on the flip side of that, the theme is the primary in this game, and I want to feel like I've gotten to the end of the true end chapter of this family's story, and it just kind of stops. And for me, I don't love that. I don't think it like keeps me from wanting to play the game, but it is a fault.
Yeah, and that's something that we agree on, that we would enjoy the game if it went on a little bit longer, that we consistently get to the end of the game. Maybe this is like giving away to the designer that we're not the most skilled players, because maybe you're supposed to get to the point where you feel like you've accomplished this big thing you wanted to accomplish. But yeah, we consistently, both of us have said, man, if I just had 2 or 3 more turns, I could have gotten to this really cool place I was trying to get to that we couldn't quite get to.
I mean, it is an interesting give and take because you do have so many guests especially in a 2-player game, you have so many guests in your hands at the end of the game, but you're just so close and you want to be able to wrap it up. And I've consistently felt that way. And maybe it is just because I'm bad at the game. It could be. The other critique that I have, and then I'll throw it back over to you.
Sure.
There are 2 things in this game that at least when we're playing at 2-player, which is what we're at a 2-top, and I want to talk about that in a minute about why we like this best at 2 players. But at least at a 2-player game, and I think higher too, there's a couple of things in the base game that make me not feel like I'm playing my own family and we're all building very similar houses. So we typically start with roughly the same amount of servants, and they all are pretty much the same. There's a little bit of difference, like if there's one family that adds one or whatever. Everybody gets the same 5 starting tiles.
for their house.
For their house. So there's no differential there. And then the theme, I don't know that I like the theme in each season. So what the theme does, it essentially flips over one of the 5 building types. And whoever scored the most of that type at the end of the season gets a bonus. Or that's how you determine who the Fairchild wants to be with for the next season. The reason I don't like it is it feeds into the whole we're all doing the same thing. So I like that you need to compete for something. And maybe if there were different starting tiles, I would have no issue with the theme. I think it's more of the conglomerate of all of it together of feeling like, oh, we're all kind of like, we have different last names and we have like slightly different abilities, but really we're the same. And so for me, that's a bit of a beef. I do know that, and we'll go through a quick rundown of expansions here in a minute, but I do think one of the expansions helps fix that. But just from a base game perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Another thing that I was frustrated with, especially the first time we played the game, and even maybe the second time when we had to go back and look some things up, is the rules were a little bit hard to get through. It took a pretty long time to read through the rules. And when we actually started playing the game, it was not very complicated, but it seemed very complicated because you had to go in this certain order where you took the tile and then put it up to the top of your board and then took the servant and then did this and then moved the servant to this box on the board and that box on the board. And maybe because the rules used so much, I don't know. It just was difficult for me to grasp reading through the rules. It made it difficult to get started on our first game. We learned this game, went through the rules, and didn't even play it because it got too late the first time. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then we said, no, we really want to give it a second chance. Like maybe it'll take less time now that we've gone through the rules once. And so we got out the rules and limped our way through the first little bit until we realized actually this is not as big of a deal as we thought it was. Now, disclaimer with that is we do have the first edition of this game. There have been edits and printings since we got the game, and so
you can only buy the second edition now.
Yeah,
so I think some of that's cleaned up.
Probably it's a little bit better than that, but that was definitely an obstacle when we first started playing. We pushed through because we were excited about the game. We wanted to play it, but again, we didn't even get to the first time we pulled it out because it was so hard to get through the rule book. And I'll say one more thing that I think is more of a weakness of the game, and it has to do with something we already touched on, is the tiles. So the tiles only get replaced when they are bought, which means if not a lot of people are buying tiles, then not a lot of new tiles come out. And there are limited ways to refresh the tile board, which means that one kind of important aspect of the game sometimes doesn't even really come into play. So there's building tiles that build onto your different types of rooms in your manor, but then there are monument cards. And monument cards are special. They are these very special like focal points. And in the rule book, it calls them, I don't remember the exact terminology, but it basically calls them like the focal point of your estate. And it makes it sound like this is what you're building towards, is these really cool monuments that you can have in your estate. And to be honest, we've played some games where we didn't even hardly see them.
I mean, it's a thick bag of tiles, and there's only like 3 monuments in a 2-player game, and I think like 5 in a 4-player game.
Yeah.
So the odds are already slim. But I think, and I can already hear the designer screaming, like, you've got to use the special actions to keep wiping the board.
I know.
But then it's costing you reputation.
The whole
exactly.
Thing. And yeah, it's hard. But you should do that. And if you did do that more often, you would get the monuments out. It wouldn't feel as hard to make some of the objective cards that make you collect these certain sets of tiles in your home. But again, I think that's a weakness of the game, is you can play a whole game, and if people are not wiping the board frequently, you don't even get to that cool part of the game, which is having this focal point monument in your mansion.
I do wish there were more monuments. I think that'd be cool. I think you'd have a little bit more flavor, because like you look through them and you're like, oh, these are so cool. And then you're like, never get to see them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and another part of that is the way that you arrange the builder market if they don't just come out in whatever order you draw them, you always arrange them
based on prestige,
but from lowest to highest prestige. And so anything that is more valuable is pretty much going to be at the very expensive end of the board.
But thematically that fits because, this is reserved only for the highest of the highs.
It does.
So I get it.
But it doesn't mean that because the builder market like ramps up as you go down the board. And in a lot, and you would think, because in some games like that, you buy the first tile and everything scoots down. So those more expensive ones might get cheaper. But that's not necessarily the case because when you draw to replace, you're replacing in order of prestige. So the expensive ones kind of stay expensive the whole time. You got to save toward them.
I kind of like that though, because I'd hate for like this level 1 prestige to like be this 800 cost thing.
That's true. That is true. Yes. That's not a bad aspect of the board. I'm just kind of trying to explain to listeners how the builder market works.
Makes sense.
And why it makes it harder to buy some of those upper level things sometimes.
For sure. No, I can get behind that. All right. So it is a 2-top. I will say that I just like playing this at 2 players. Honestly, it's because it's with you and me. Like, this is one of those you and me games that I really enjoy pulling out on a date night. I don't have friends that like this theme. I mean, I think I do through you, technically. But, like, none of my friends have ever shown any interest in this theme, which is totally fine.
Poor friends. They are missing out.
They're fine. They're doing great. But I know that you really like it, and so I enjoy playing this with you. And it plays really quickly and smoothly once you know what you're doing, especially at a 2-player count. I think there's things that make it fun. Like, you've got a lot of drama and chaos going on when it's a big game. But for that smooth, trying to get my whole engine going and building the thing that I want to build and whatever, and for me, it also takes the opportunity. It gives the opportunity to talk through the different dramatic stories. Whereas with a 6-player game, it's like, it would take forever. It doesn't
go to 6. It goes to 4.
Well, that's a peek at the expansions.
Oh, okay.
But in a 4-player game as well, you just don't have as much time to do that.
Yeah, and I would agree that I like it best at 2. But I will say that something that the higher player count adds is you have a lot more competition for the Fairchilds. You have a lot more competition for the building tiles. I mean, everything feels tighter. It feels more chaotic. And frankly, that might be more thematic because you wouldn't just usually have 2 high-class families in an area. You would have more than that. But I'd say for 2 of us, some of the benefits are I can kind of watch what you're doing.
Yeah.
I can kind of know what you're going for. I can see what servants you have available. It's only you and myself competing for the Fairchild. So I know how many points you have on your purples, for example, if that's the theme and that's what we're going for. So there's maybe, and I mean, you can watch that with everybody else. It's just a lot more to keep track of when there's more people. But when there's 2, it's very highlighted the other person's strategy and how you can mess them up, like taking their underbutler in the last turn,
Yeah, I mean, that's just a great time when you lose your understudy butler on the last turn of something that you really needed. It's great. Love it.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to knock it at those higher player counts. I just really enjoy playing this game at 2.
It's smooth and it's quick. It is. It's really quick. I mean, we can play it in 30 minutes if we don't have to look up rules.
Yeah. I would say we get through these in 45 minutes.
Yeah, 45 minutes because we usually have to look up some rules.
Yeah, I mean, we don't... Yeah, I think we always check ourselves on certain things. And then, but...
Well, and that kind of leads us to... We always try to talk about player interaction, which we haven't covered.
Yeah.
You share the same builder market. You share the same theme cards for each round, and you're competing for the attention of the same family each round through those theme cards. I'd say there is a good amount of player interaction because you've got to watch and snatch up your upgrades before other people get them. Mm-hmm. There are some cards that are attack cards. Now, usually those are your less desirable guests who are going to take down your reputation along with your opponent's reputation. But there is the ability in some cases to do that. And I talked about taking servants from somebody else. So there's that level of player interaction, I would say, in terms of, being able to sabotage each other in small ways and competing for the same goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, expansions.
Go for it.
There's several expansions. There's a Wessex expansion, which gives you a 5th player option, and then a bunch of stuff that adds to what you already have. And then also it adds you can either start with a breakfast room or a tennis court in your manor that you're working on. There's a characters expansion, which introduces an extra worker placement in a variety of ways with different objective cards for running off those unsavory guests. And there's also new ways to recruit prestigious guests as well. And then I'm very interested in this. There's this, what they call second chance servants. You can hire these like either intoxicated or flirtatious or clumsy servants, and they have like this thing that they do that's really good, but there's an added consequence for using them. And this is also the one where it gives you those distinguished family members, which adds a little bit more variety than there was before. And then another thing that it does is it gives you a full co-op mode. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this characters expansion for sure. And then there's one that's newer. It's called the Upstairs Downstairs. It adds another board that lets you go up to 6, adds a whole bunch of new guests, new improvement tiles, milestones, all kinds of stuff. So there's lots of different things that you can add to this game. And like I said, there's also a second edition for it. So this game has received a ton of support.
So MSRP on this through the publisher, Kayenta Games, is $64.
Yep. We'll have a link in the description.
Yep. And you can get the expansions as well. They range from $19 all the way up to almost $40, depending on which expansion you get. So we'll put a link to that in the description box for anybody that's interested. I mean, I feel like that's worth it. I would put this at a $60 to $80 probably dollar game.
Yeah.
With the components, your servants come as little wooden figurines. Your tiles are nice and hefty. Again, we already talked about the beautiful artwork and portraits and everything. So what are your thoughts on that, Jared?
Yeah, I think the price is right. It's all the cardboard's got that really thick feel to it, or you can upgrade to those sweet metal coins if you're interested in that.
Whew. And
the cards have a nice feel to them. Everything about it, I'm really pleased with the quality of this game. So I have no issue with $64 as the price for the base game. And I really think we might jump on that character expansion. There's a lot in there. And at $38, I think you're getting a lot for that expansion. Yep.
Especially if it evens out some of the feeling like we're two different families that you were saying was important to you. So
that's right. I'd love to try that out for sure. So, all right. With that said, let's jump into grading. Would you like me to go first? You want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. I think for me, Obsession sits at a solid B. I don't know that I want to pull it out all the time, but when I do, I have a wonderful time jumping back into this world, dealing with all the angst and the drama and all of the meeting of new people and the building of the estate. I really enjoy it. I love so many parts of this game. I know I listed off several things that I critiqued, but despite those, I still very much enjoy playing it. It is a great date night game that we enjoy together, and I'm very pleased with this purchase. And like I said, I'm excited to get one or two of the expansions and bring that to the table too. So yeah, we'll have to see how that plays itself out, but definitely B for me.
I'm probably going to be close to you, but I'm going to go a little bit lower. I think I'll go a B-. So I love the theme. I love the story. I love that I can really get into it, but it was very difficult with the rule book the first time. And with some of the it felt so precise with the step by step by step. And then it felt like it was over so soon after I'd learned all those processes.
That's true.
And so I think that there is some improvement that could be made in the rule book. I think if it was a slightly longer game, it would raise up. But I mean, B- still means it's a great game. I love this game. I mean, we haven't found one that does the theme quite as well as it does. And to be honest, I'm just going to be totally honest with y'all. We have 2 other Jane Austen games that are themed.
Those are very party-ish,
based off of Jane Austen.
That's not
this
even close.
Takes the cake.
Wow, weird flex.
I know. How many Jane Austen games do y'all have, huh, listeners?
Woof.
No, I'm just kidding. So
the angst.
That's right. Come to my party.
Dang.
No, I love the game. But if there were some things that were just slightly modified, I know that it would be an A.
Sure.
But that's why I have to score it at a B- right now.
It's interesting though, right? Because I feel like if I paused you in the middle of a game and said, what would you grade this? I think you'd be like, this is an A.
Yes.
And it's the ending. It's the ending that like, I think docks it for you.
It's the ending. And also currently, as we're talking about the game, I'm thinking of the entirety of all the times we've played it.
Yeah.
And I'm remembering how tough those first 2 times were.
Yeah.
As we learned it.
I do want to emphasize.
Anybody that buys this game and brings it to their table, they're going to be going through that beginning part too to get to the enjoyable part of, okay, I know how it's going and it's really clicking now.
Yeah. No, and I don't want to speak against your grade. I just will throw the asterisk out there again that I don't know if the second edition cleans that up enough to where it feels more smooth.
That's fair. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep, that's fair.
But with the first edition, I 100% agree with what you're saying. All right. Any other thoughts?
Nope. I'm good. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep playing it for date nights and competing, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And, if any of our local listeners or people buy this game, maybe we have a game night and we teach it to you, and then you avoid the first couple of times of trying to get through and learn all the terminology.
Or maybe you were like, hey guys, the second edition's way easier. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, give us feedback.
For sure. Yes, with that, feedback. If you have feedback or want to give us your thoughts on the game, we would love to hear from you. Links to our socials are in the description. If you don't like socials, I get it. Check out our website at thegametablepodcast.com. Shoot us an email at thegametablepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on Board Game Geek. All these links are also in the description. 5-star reviews, subscribing in your podcast player of choice, following us on socials, and joining the conversation on Discord. These heroic actions are immensely helpful in growing this podcast. I do want to go ahead and throw in here, we are going back to Fun K Town in Knoxville, Tennessee at the end of April. We would love to have you join us. It is a great time and a great weekend of gaming and just fellowship. We're going to go down and teach some games, but also have a lot of time to play too. So if you are interested in that, please hit me up and we will talk some details. Special thanks to Angie Santiago for our cover art. A very special thanks to Joel Fajari for the special intro music, the Victorian Gothic piano piece that was used at the beginning of the episode. He has titled that song 1,000 Years Ago, and our links for his work on Pixabay are in the episode description. To Anna Snyder, who made the intro and outro music, and to Alexi Chistelin for the How to Play background music. Join us next week as we head back over to the feature table. In the meantime, may your dice rolls and your card draws be blessed, and your experiences at the table be ones to remember forever.
And farewell to all of you fine listeners.